If you're wanting to be a great facilitator, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the hundreds of different tools and techniques and things you might need to do in the room. But if you're trying to focus on everything, it's easy to focus on nothing, and then everything kind of flattens out to be average. So in this video, I cut through all the clutter and I just share with you 5 things that I think are the most important things when it comes to facilitating well. If you can get these 5 things right, you'll be doing a great job in the room. Hi, I'm Kerry Price. I'm the founder of the Facilitators Network, and I use the principles of deliberate generosity to make sure that no meeting or workshop is ever wasted. I've been a professional facilitator for 20 odd years, and in that time I've led thousands of meetings, workshops and community conversations. Now I help other trainers and facilitators do it well too. If you want to be a great facilitator, there's dozens of skills and techniques that you can add to your facilitation toolkit. But really, they all boil down to 5 essential facilitation skills, things that you need to be, do, have or provide in the room. In this video, I'm going to share all 5 of those things so you can make sure you're bringing your best self to the room every time. Essential 1 is clarity. Your job as a facilitator is to make it easier or possible for the group you're working with to achieve whatever it is they're wanting to achieve. And that means you need to be clear about all sorts of different things. First of all, you need to be clear about the purpose of the workshop. What are you ultimately trying to achieve, and what would success look like? You need to make sure that the participants and you are both on the same page about that purpose. So getting clear about that right from the beginning is really important. You also need to be clear about instructions, and as you're inviting people to do things, ask things, share things, discuss things, you need to be clear about what you're wanting them to do and how you're wanting them to do it. If people feel confused or there's pieces missing, it's easy for people to disengage and stop contributing. You also need to be clear on the roles and expectations of the people in the room. What is your role as a facilitator? Where does your responsibility start and finish? What are the expectations of the participants, and how are you wanting them to show up? Basically, whatever it is that you're doing in the room needs clarity, and it's your job to help provide it. Essential 2 is confidence. Now, I'm not suggesting that as a facilitator you need to be a raging extrovert and bounce in with all the confidence of Tigger. When I'm talking about confidence, I'm talking about a quiet self-assurance. A self-assurance that says, even if things don't go perfectly, I know that things will be okay. You need to feel confident enough to make the tough calls, challenge perspectives, and call out behavior if things are going a little awry. Priya Parker talks about this as generous authority. In other words, as a facilitator, you're not showing up to be authoritative just for the sake of being in charge, but you're showing up with some level of confident authority so that you can achieve the most generous outcome for the group. Confidence gives people a sense of safety. They know that you are holding the container, you're creating the parameters so that any discussion can happen safely in that space. The other thing about confidence is that it helps sets the tone for the room. Often people talk about a facilitator being like a thermometer. You need to take the temperature of the room and respond accordingly. And I think that's true, but I don't think it's the only way to be. I think it's also important to consider yourself as a facilitator like a thermostat. You set the temperature of the room. So if you come in confident or self-assured, that sets the tone and creates a sense of safety for the people. If you come in nervous, that also tells a story. Now, if you're finding it hard to be confident at the front of the room, there's a little trick, I guess it's a trick, that I've learned over the years. I've found that if I'm ever going into a workshop feeling really nervous, it's because I've caught in this trap of, I hope they like me. when actually having the people in the room like me is something I can't control. I can't control whether you like me or not. What I can control is if I'm being of service. So instead of worrying going into the workshop, I hope they like me, I change my thinking to be, I hope I can be of service. Now that is something I can have control over, and therefore there's nothing to worry about. The third essential is connection. As a facilitator, part of your role is to connect participants with each other and connect participants to the purpose of the session and connect ideas one to another. So it's connection, connection, connection. In terms of creating connection amongst participants, this is all about creating a sense of safety in the room. Now, we can't make anyone feel anything, but we can create an environment where the feeling of safety has the best chance of showing up, and connection is a part of that. Dr. Gabor Mate says that safety is not the absence of fear, but the presence of connection. In other words, if people feel really connected to each other, they can have hard conversations, they can have differences of opinion, they can even feel uncomfortable and still feel safe. So part of your role as a facilitator is about encouraging connection between participants so that really good conversations can happen. The second part of connection is about connecting participants to the purpose of the session so that people understand what they can contribute to the outcome and the value they will get out of the outcome being realized. You need to give them a reason for being in the room. So making sure that they're connected to the purpose is really important. The third thing about connection is about connecting ideas to ideas. In other words, you can have a whole group conversation. There's lots of ideas and perspectives and opinions all circling, and you have to be able to summarize those, put the pieces together so that the group can work towards consensus or alignment. Connection, connection, connection. The fourth essential ingredient is curiosity. As a facilitator, it's your job to ask really curious questions to draw out the wisdom in the room. Now, if you're an external facilitator, it's easy to be curious because you're not embedded in the weeds and you know about what's going on. And so you can lean in and ask the questions that other people may be afraid to ask. If you're an internal facilitator and you're facilitating a group through a process, you might be cursed with the curse of knowledge. You already know the answers to some things. You need to practice putting that aside so that you can ask genuinely curious questions that really get to the heart of what's going on. The other thing about curiosity is it's important that you're curious about people's behavior. Sometimes when there's challenging behaviors happening within the group, it's easy to feel frustrated or annoyed and you just want to call it out and ask them to move on. But behind every behavior, there's a story. It's really helpful to get curious around, I wonder why people are behaving like that. I wonder what that comment really meant. And if you can lean in with a curious attitude and really consider what might be behind the behavior, it's much easier to address it. Essential 5 is care. I believe that great facilitators genuinely care for the people they are working with. And when I say genuinely care, I don't mean that you have to be best of friends with everyone, but you need to be able to step into their shoes, you need to be able to empathize for their situation, and you really need to care about creating a successful outcome. When you care about the people in the room, you're much more connected to the person and making it successful for them rather than being stuck to a rigid plan. And that's where deliberate generosity comes in. Deliberate generosity is the ability to think deeply and act with intention. That's deliberate. And generosity is about giving people more than is expected or necessary for their benefit. Now, you can't do that if you don't genuinely care for the people in the room. So that's the 5 things that you need to be, do, have, or provide in a workshop. There is the clarity, the confidence, the connection, the curiosity, and the care. But knowing those things is only part of the process. You also need to know how to design a workshop. So in my next video, how to design a workshop, I walk you through a 3-step process so that you can design a workshop that is easy to facilitate and gets the outcomes you need. The link is in the description below. Go check it out.